overall vision for when I was at the highest point of my life was to share, because at that point we had our son Daniel, was to share the knowledge that was so different from his dad's knowledge. Rick worked in an industry that was truly a commerce-driven business, and trying to make sure that we always balanced each other out, so that if there was something, if his industry went down, my industry would be at the height of its success points. So I worked in aerospace, and I started out a lowly clerk and grew up to be a program manager, and I worked with NASA and the Department of Defense and a group which is Advanced Warfare Group, which is called DARPA. And I secured contracts from those different people to build satellites and to put together teams to make things work well and then to launch them. So I wanted to make sure that as Dan was growing up and going to middle school and all, that I took him with me, and he went everywhere that I went so that he could see a difference that I never got to see. Because in my childhood, when my parents would go to Europe or to South America or any of those places, we did not go. We did not share those same experiences. So I wanted Dan to have those. At the lowest point in our lives, I didn't have a job. Rick wanted to go to Colorado because he had a job offer, and we boxed everything up and we went, and I had to figure out how I was going to help put money into the household, because cost of living in Colorado was really expensive. And so we had to figure out how to make that all work. And all I could think was the same thing that I knew from looking at my grandmother. My grandmother was my driving force. She lost her husband when she was 49, and she continued to work and got her master's degree and did all kinds of wonderful things, including guiding and directing my sister and I. So I just used her example. That's how I wanted Rick. I wanted to be a great partner. Did I end up where I wanted to be? Yes. I really enjoyed and would have loved to have continued my career at Ball. Fortunately, that didn't all happen, but that's okay. But no, actually, I was engaged to marry somebody else. And he graduated from college, and he wanted us to move to Rochester, New York. And so we were making plans and doing all of this, and I suddenly said to him, "So when are we getting married?" "Well, I want to put that on the back burner." And I said, "Not going to happen. I'm not going to Rochester and support you and get a job and pay the bills without marriage. That isn't happening." So I broke it off. I was upset. I was depressed. Went back to school the next fall and wasn't real happy. And then I met Rick at finals time, and we dated for a whole year, and then we got engaged for a year, and then we got married. What advice would I give somebody who's struggling, and whether physically, emotionally, or socially? I don't know that I have good advice for somebody in those conditions, because I'm going to be honest with you, most of my drive in life has been somebody telling me I couldn't. So when people tell me I can't, the answer is stand back, you watch. I'm going to show you what I can do. And I think that comes from having parents who were alcoholics who would say, you can't do that, you can't do that. Right? It was like when I went off to school and they didn't want me going off to school, my dad did not believe in educating women. And so I would say, it's you as a person. It's hard because you have to decide, are you going to give into it, or are you going to say, watch me, stand out of my way and watch me. I'm going to take the whole thing by storm. I've lived with a lot of people with depression, and it's been hard to help them overcome their depression because it's internal. And when my brother had depression so bad, all I could do was make him go out and walk with me. I mean, that's how I end up walking 5 miles a day, is because I knew I couldn't get him to exercise, and I knew that movement was going to help him with his depression, but I couldn't get him to do any of those things. So I dragged him practically down the street trying to help him with his depression. And fortunately, the more he walked, the better he got. He still has battles with depression, but at least now he realizes that there are some other things he can do to try to negate the depression. What I started out to be in school was not an aerospace engineer. I wanted to be a civil engineer. I wanted to build bridges and roads. But when I went to Rolla, the rule was, there were a couple of rules. One was that to graduate, you had to swim the Olympic pool twice, the full length of the Olympic pool twice. And that was your physical education requirement, because we didn't have any PE classes. Then the other requirement was that you had to work 2 consecutive summers in your field of employment. So starting when I finished my freshman year, in the spring of my freshman year, I started applying for jobs. And by the time I was in my junior year, my roommate and I had taped all of our rejection letters on the walls in our dorm room, because Debbie couldn't get a job and I couldn't get a job. And we were going nuts what we were going to do. And so it was really strange, because the dean of the school came, told our house mother that he wanted to meet with us in our dorm rooms rather than making us feel like we were being singled out or anything. So he came down, and Mrs. Rogers, brought him down, and we invited him into our dorm room, and he's standing there and he's looking at the papers taped on the wall. And he said, I got to talk to the 2 of you, because you're not going to graduate on time. You don't have 2 consecutive summer sessions in your field of employment. And he said, and he's kind of looking around, and he goes, what's all the papers on your wall? And I said, oh, those are our rejection letters. And he goes, what? I said, yeah, those are all of our rejection letters since we started in our freshman year. And he goes, are you serious? I said, uh-huh. And he goes, why doesn't your dad's just hire you for their engineering firms? I looked at Debbie. I said, Debbie, your dad's a farmer. She said, yeah. And I said, and my dad doesn't own an engineering company, or I would have made my dad hire you, Debbie. And she laughed. She goes, I don't think they understand that we're not engineering families. Our families don't own big businesses. And he said, so you don't have any family that owns an engineering firm that can hire you? I said, not me. I said, tobacco farmer, yeah. Debbie goes, we raise cattle. but I don't think that's going to get me credit for my engineering. And he goes, well, you got to change your degrees if you want to graduate. He said, but I want you to know you can stay here as long as you want. You can keep going to school as long as you want until you get those 2 consecutive summers. And I said, I don't have that kind of money. Debbie looked at me and she said, I don't have that kind of money. And he said, then we need to talk about you changing your fields of engineering. I said, so what can we get degrees in and still graduate on time? He said, well, you can get degrees in applied mathematics because all of your engineering counts. All the math classes you've taken count. You're going to have to take some more. And he said, the other thing you could get a degree in is computer science. And he said to Debbie, he looked at her and he said, and you have all the computer science that you need to get your degree. He said, turned to me and he said, you have to take 3 more classes. I said, I don't want to take any more computer science classes. I said, I've already taken 8. I don't want any more. And he goes, emotionally, I'm exactly where I want to be. We moved to Florida for one reason, and that was to put family back together. And that was my whole impetus for coming to Florida. I wish I were more physically fit, but that's not, I got to work on that. That's a me thing. That's not something else. But yeah, this is where I wanted to be. I want family, and I wanted Flynn to grow up knowing Grandma and Grandpa, because when Dan grew up, he didn't know my parents at all, and he got to see his Grandma and Grandpa Jones. Some years he got to see him twice a year, and some years he only got to see him once a year, and that's not enough. That doesn't make binding family. Mm-hmm.
Right. Okay. That's awesome. Do you have any regrets regarding your profession or education?
Not my education, because I have my bachelor's degree and then got old and got my master's degree. So, no, I'm pretty happy with that. I could have gone on for my PhD. I had 2 professors who wanted to sponsor me for my PhD, and that didn't appeal at all. So, no, I got where I wanted there. Yeah, I think the biggest thing I wish is that somehow, magically, I could have prevented the man who made my life miserable and forced me out of aerospace. That's the one thing I wish. God could have sprinkled his graces on and made him disappear so that I could have continued on and finished out my career doing what I love to do. But that's okay, because I left there and went into teaching and helped a lot of kids and have lots of success stories where kids have gotten a hold of me to tell me their successes after I'd had them as a teacher. So I guess God guides and directs whatever he wants us to do. All the women, and I need to say this, and I didn't know this growing up, but when I was a kid, or in my family line, as far back as I've been able to look at, back in the early 1800s, the women in my family have been strong women. They went off to New York to get an education so they could go back home so they could teach. They went off and became writers so that they could get jobs on newspapers long before it was socially acceptable. And my grandmother was I didn't know any of these other women. I didn't know that they had done wonderful things until I got much older. But when I was a kid, my grandmother, having grown up with alcoholic parents, I spent a lot of time with my grandmother. Now, Dan knew my grandmother, and he thought she was his grandmother. It took a long time for him to realize that she was actually his great-grandmother. But my grandmother, when things got really rough, my grandmother would call my mom and say, put her on a bus. Put the girls on a bus. And my mom would put us on a bus and we would go cross country and go stay with my grandmother on the farm. We worked the tobacco fields. We worked a 5-acre truck farm. Everything that we did was what paid for us to be able to stay on the farm. So the tobacco crop paid all the taxes. There wasn't a mortgage on the farm, so that was wonderful. It paid for the gasoline in the car and the propane for the heating, and we had pot-bellied stoves, and we had outhouses. We had no inside water. We had 2 wells and a cistern. But that was all okay because we didn't know. We worked hard, but we didn't know we were poor. There was never an image in our minds that we were poor. My brothers didn't go to the farm because they didn't want to be, they told my dad they didn't want to be poor. So he sent them to live with his parents in the city. I think I was blessed better. I think I got to watch a woman work hard and be successful and do wonderful things with her life. I don't think I would have seen that in the city. I don't think I would have gotten that knowledge base in the city. So, yeah, I think my grandmother was truly the shining light, the beacon in my growing up.
Yeah, she truly sounds like inspirational.
Oh, she was, and just a wonderful Christian woman. I mean, she helped everybody. And all the people, the one thing that makes life different is that living down on the farm, everybody around us was my family. They were all related to my grandfather. Not to my grandmother, but to my grandfather. And everybody, my grandmother, some of them she knew how they were related, other ones she didn't know how they were related, but she knew that they were family. And so we would have gatherings on Sundays out in the backyard, and there'd be 40 people there, all bringing something to eat. We'd have the minister come and have dinner with us on Sunday after church. And if somebody needed something, my grandma made sure that they got it. The cousins that we had that lived up around the bend over the creek from us, they didn't have much. So every Christmas, we'd put together stuff, and then we would go, we'd take food, and we'd take Christmas presents. And we'd go take them and leave them on their front porch. Because Grandma'd say, they don't need to know who it's coming from. They just need to know that God was giving it to them. So yeah, quite a woman. True love means that you're married to your best friend. That you're there, thick and thin, no matter what it looks like, no matter how hard it gets, no matter how much you want to tear their heads off. You want to get in a car and run away. You don't. You stick there and you talk it out and you work it out and you compromise and you recognize the fact that you both are not wrong. It's just you can't see it through their eyes and they can't see it through yours. So you got to give them your vision and they got to give you theirs to be able to come to a good compromise. You couldn't be married. Come next April, we'll be married 50 years. Couldn't do that if we weren't willing to compromise and stick to it.
Catherine M. Renter. Do I believe having a significant other around is beneficial? At this point in my life, no. Because I would not get back into a relationship. Not at this point. I mean, who knows? I'm almost 65. Yeah, I don't think I'm going to find anybody. But I don't know how to answer that. If you're truly in love, yes. If you meet each other's needs, yes. If you both want the same goals in life, yes. Having that other significant other is worth it, yes. The people that have stuck around in my life is my daughter, my grandchildren, and my sister that lives here in Florida, and my brother in Texas. If I ever needed anything, they'd be there. Advice I would give to somebody that's struggling, either mentally or physically, anyway, believe in yourself. You know what your boundaries are. You know, when I divorced my second husband, I was fit to be tied. I got out of it, and I'm glad I did, because I was really, really struggling. But believe in yourself, believe in your family, read the Bible. It all helps. I did not end up where I wanted to be at this point in my life. I did want to be with somebody. Would I... Right now, I couldn't go back to being with somebody. I'm so used to being by myself that it would be really, really hard to get into another relationship. What would have been my career of choice? Probably working with photography and animals, sea life, wildlife, you name it. I love wildlife. Where am I? Mentally and emotionally, I'm good. I'm really good. I get depressed sometimes, but who doesn't? You know, I get lonely sometimes. But I've learned to live with it. Growing up, who was my biggest inspiration? I looked up to my sister a lot. I really did. And then, of course, my mother. My definition of true love is when two people have the same goals, love unconditionally, want the same things, never judge what a person will do. If they do wrong, be there for them. If they do right, praise them.
I think that's all the questions I have written down.
Yay.
I'm gonna just continue a little more.
Okay.
I still have 20 minutes on my thing, so might as well. Let's see here. What were some of the biggest obstacles you had to overcome with a significant other?
Some of the biggest obstacles, I'm not sure you want to know this, that I have overcome with my significant other. Number one was not being in a stable place. My second husband was always wanting. When the goal was not available to do this kind of stuff. And some of the biggest obstacles, both husbands, they're cheating. That hurts. And it hurts bad. Did I get over it? In time. In time. That's why I say I don't know if I'd ever get married again. Could I trust again? Probably not.
Do you think... I think a way to phrase it.
Yeah, I know.
Do you think something like cheating in a relationship has a negative impact on the rest of your relationships?